Colorado takes another step toward a district championship, and no, Mother Nature can't stop football in West Texas. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Football Fever on LISD TV, your source for high school football here on the South Plains. I'm Travis Cran, and with me as always is a man who is no stranger, he's just a Ranger, George Watson of the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal.
I'll take that one.
That's a great one.
That's a good one right there. Given the circumstances, I'll take that one.
I knew you'd like that one. So, well, it took a while to get started on Thursday night, about 3.5 hours actually.
A little bit,
if
yeah.
you remember right, I'm sure. But at Lowry Field, and maybe the Mustangs would have been better off not playing this one, George. But nonetheless, a tough loss, and Butch Henderson took credit for the whole thing. Apparently,
he did. It was a tough night, a tough loss for the Mustangs. At some point, it just became comical. My suggestion was taking the best player from each team, going up to the press box, hooking an Xbox up to the video board, and just playing it on Madden 2011, solving it that way. That probably would have been better if you're the Mustangs, because they came out very flat, didn't have any energy. Tascosa had all the energy in the world in that game, and it really showed. It was a defensive game for a while, but Tascosa got a couple of big plays, a couple of defensive touchdowns, and scored really in about a 2 or 3 minute span. And really from there, it was all over for Coronado. They just couldn't match the intensity. I don't know if the wet conditions affected the way they played offensive football, but they couldn't play defensive football either. So yeah, I think some soul searching for Coronado here these next 2 weeks. To coming off that loss, that was a really, really bad loss. And like you said, credit Butch. He took complete responsibility for it, and we'll see how they rebound this week.
Now only 110 yards of offense, 6 turnovers in that game for Coronado. Hurts their chances now for the postseason with 2 straight losses. Another team not really thinking about the postseason, but more or less just looking for a win this year. Lubbock High taking on San Angelo Central, and it was just so close for the Westerns.
It was that close. You got to feel bad for those kids. I mean, they played, probably their best football game of the year against Central. Had to weather some downs, but really came back. I mean, they got their offense in gear. Best, maybe the best offensive output, in a single game this year. Had 270 yards. Shaquille Johnson ran for a couple of touchdowns and 100 yards. And you can kind of see what happens when they get a lot of their weapons back. They had a kid, Tony Bell, back for a second week, had him out at receiver. And so they had things in the right position. It just couldn't, close it out. They had the 22-21 lead late in the game and just couldn't close it out defensively. Central gets the 31-yarder, field goal with about 1:45 left. And Lubbock High still had a chance to go down and get a score and win the game, but just couldn't close the deal. So you got to feel bad for Coach Speck and the Westerns, but I think some positives out of that they can take here for the next couple of weeks with a couple of big rivalry games coming up.
Monterey looking for its second win in a row after beating Coronado last week in a rivalry game, taking on Amarillo, the Sandies. Apparently too much for the Plainsmen in this one, because it's hard to beat a team if you're going to spot them 31 points right off the bat.
Yeah, you cannot spot any team in this league 31 points, especially Amarillo, the way they run the football and control the clock. And I thought Monterey would come out and play better than this. I thought they had the momentum coming off the win over Coronado, but they just couldn't seem to match it defensively. And credit Amarillo. I mean, Amarillo is a tough team to get a hold of offensively with that wing tee that Coach Maxfield's running. And Monterey is not the first team, or probably not going to be the last team that's had a problem, slowing that team down. So hopefully Monterey can come back and kind of regroup this week, with a big game, an afternoon game. But they've got a few questions they've got to answer still, and kind of get back into that rhythm and get that confidence back that they had against Coronado.
One shining spot for the Plainsmen, Thomas Walker with 22 carries, 140 yards in the game. So obviously some production on offense, but it was too little too late in this game. Another team looking to try and get back, keep on the winning streak, I should say. Friendship taking on Palo Duro in a big game that could have been that swing game to either push Friendship more toward the postseason. Unfortunately, it looks like they went the other way in this one.
Yeah, unfortunately for Friendship, I mean, this may be one of the more schizophrenic teams I've seen, on the South Plains in a long time. Not just 4A, not just Friendship. I mean, you're talking about a team that 1 week will score 35, the next week will score 7. 1 week will give up 14, only 14 points. The next week will give up 35 points. They've just never really been able to put everything together at one time, on the field, offensively, defensively, special teams, and for that reason, Friendship is going to miss the playoffs for the first time since 1992. This loss, pretty much knocks me. If my math is right, and I went to, I didn't go to the big school, so my math can be wrong a little bit. I don't want to say anything about public schools. I'm a product of public school, but I got into journalism because I'm not good at math. So if my math is right, I think Friendship is out of this because I don't think they can win any tiebreaker with any team that they may end up tied with. So, a tough loss for Friendship. This is one they had to have, and so we'll see how they react. They've got 2 games left in the season. We'll see how Friendship reacts because now I think they can start kind of looking toward next year and how they're going to rectify this situation.
Thankfully, you didn't have to be a mathematician to add up Cooper's score in this next game because the Pirates playing extremely well offensively and defensively. We'll find out more about Adam Taylor later in the show because he was a big reason for stopping Lamesa as Cooper wins this one 52-14.
52-14, and another big win for Cooper. I went back and looked. They've been on a very good roll the last 3 weeks in district, and what they've done is they've taken the teams. They've taken Brownfield, Brownfield, Levelland, and Lamesa, the 3 teams that they should have been beaten, and they've really done a good job of getting on them early, putting the foot on the throat, and keeping it there. I think they've outscored those 3 teams 142-21, if I remember correctly. And so they've done a really good job of going out and getting up on them early and putting the foot on the throat and taking care of business. And now that sets up for the next 2 weeks with Shallowater and Estacado. We're going to see what kind of team Cooper has, but I like the way they're playing offensively. They've just got so many weapons out there, and then they're playing outstanding defense right now. So a good win for Cooper and keeping that momentum going in District 2-3A.
Yeah, Pirates looking closer and closer to do that showdown with Estacado, but Shallowater could be that bump in the road. Another team trying to keep things going. Roosevelt trying to get back on that winning streak. Ran into something with Childress, though, because Childress ended up just getting those few more points and stopping Roosevelt when they had to. Yeah,
a little bit unexplainable, deal for Roosevelt. I mean, they had 3 turnovers. One of them was returned for a touchdown. They let some point. I talked with Coach Pointer, and you know how high energy Coach Pointer is, and that might have been the most down I've ever heard from him in his voice. He was very down after that loss to Childress last week because that was really kind of their swing game. They really needed that win because everything else in the district happened. Muleshoe beat Littlefield, so everything else was setting up for them to be able to have a chance at the playoffs. Now they're going to have to win 2 straight and have Bushland lose to Childress this week, which I don't know is very likely. So yeah, Roosevelt a big game that they just let get out of their control with the turnovers. Some slips. The muddy field after the rains, he said, really played a big deal, and they weren't able to really get control of that game after Childress had built about a 2 or 3 touchdown lead. So a very tough loss for a Roosevelt team that could end up being one of the better teams on the South Plains, but could miss the playoffs.
Now, you mentioned Muleshoe and Littlefield. Muleshoe getting the win over Littlefield this past weekend, and not just winning, but in convincing fashion. A game we usually see being a pretty close game. The running game for Littlefield not necessarily there because of the defense from Muleshoe, and it wasn't Cooper Washington, but Isaac Baca showing up in this one. 151 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the Mules just literally ran away with it.
Yeah, very, very surprising outcome on this game. I was sitting there watching it on the scoreboard, as the night progressed, and you're sitting there at 13-8, 28, and you're thinking, all right, Littlefield's, they're still in it, they can do this. But credit Muleshoe, what an outstanding job, offensively and especially defensively, being able to shut down Littlefield's running game and really kind of hold them off. And then, I think we might have seen this a little bit with Shallowater. Remember, Shallowater with its spread offense, really gave Littlefield fits. I think Muleshoe in the same way really kind of gave him fits. And remember, Roosevelt played, Littlefield tough and with the same kind of spread offense that Muleshoe runs. So, we look at surprise at the score. Now, I'm not surprised that Muleshoe won. I thought it would be an even game, and I thought they had a chance. But for Muleshoe to dominate them the way they did was very, very surprising.
Snyder, another team that when you think of offense in this region, you think of the Snyder Tigers and the season that they had. Obviously tough to play the #1 team last week. You feel almost sorry for Sweetwater because apparently they decided to take out all their aggression on them.
Yeah, this was the game that Snyder was taking out a lot of aggression on, and winning big. And we continue to talk about Snyder and all the weapons they have, but their defense, I think, to be able to put 61, having 61 points scored against you and be able to put that behind you and come back and only give up 6 the next week, I think it says a lot about the mindset and the mentality that Coach Rogers has with those kids at Snyder. Very good win for the Tigers, and again, Keenan Ward just an outstanding job running and passing the ball. And I think Snyder, they've got a big game coming up this week with Abilene Wiley, so I think this was the game they needed to really get back on track.
And you mentioned more 342 yards of total offense, 2 touchdowns in that game, so obviously he's got things clicking for the Tigers. Okay, when we come back, we'll introduce you to a Pirate defender that was all over the field for John Wyndham on Friday. Our AJ Player of the Week is next.